my experience starting working life as a graduate and to where I am now, and how I think some of the correlation between the more kind of open I've been with my sexuality, the more senior I've become. Really welcome any questions, and yeah, I look forward to getting some engagement. So I'm going to start off just by saying, so my name is Julie Atwater. I started my role at Atos as a graduate about 10 years ago now. I'm gay, I live in York with my wife, my pronouns are she, her. And it was a really nice chance to prepare for this and reflect back on my time as a graduate. It is 10 years, so as you'll see, things have moved on a little bit from thinking about your experiences now. I studied international business with German at the University of Brighton, and I applied for about, well, certainly over 30 different graduate schemes. It was pretty dire at the time, but I got there in the end. I'm going to talk to you just very briefly about who Atos are, and but before I do that, I want just to share with you some of the alumni who we now have at Atos. I've just got some of their names and pictures because I think it's just quite nice to sort of see some of the degree programs that they've done, what roles they've ended up in, plus just a little bit more about some of them have done year in industry, some of the extracurricular activities they've been in. So I won't go into detail about them, but hopefully quite nice to sort of see some of the alumni. So I work at Atos. Who are we? We're a global IT services and technology company supporting high profile clients across a number of different industries. We have global partnerships and alliances with the likes of Microsoft, Google, Dell, Oracle, Cisco, lots of big names. We are the European #1 in big data, cybersecurity, digital workplace, and we are also the global leader in decarbonised digital. We're the #1 on the Dow Jones Sustainability Index for technology companies, and that's something that is a real priority for our CEO. So lots of techie buzzwords like AI, edge computing, Internet of Things, big data and analytics. And the way that we are structured is in 6 different industries. So I work in financial services, for example. We also do work within manufacturing, public sector. And throughout my career, I've worked around all of them. We are really encouraged to change roles at Atos. So starting as a graduate, and I'll sort of talk you through a little bit of my career history. I started working as a service delivery manager in the infrastructure part of our business. So dealing with clients who have outsourced their IT to us. And again, lots of different types of clients, kind of dealing with servers and networks, which was a real shock to me from doing business studies effectively at university. But I really wanted to join a company like Atos that is global. So as it says on the screen, we have over 100,000 people across 72 different countries. And it was really important for me to have that global view in the workplace. Like I say, encouraged to move around in lots of different roles. And I think as a graduate, that was something that became quite clear to me quite early on when applying. When I was applying for different jobs, I must say, when you start applying for 30 different roles, I was getting a bit desperate. And I was out and proud at university. I had a girlfriend who is now my wife. And yeah, sexuality was something that I'd come out to my parents or all my friends knew. I mean, Brighton probably is one of the gayest cities in the world, and probably one of the reasons why I chose to go to university there. But going into the workplace was something very different to me, kind of the corporate world. My mum was a sculptor, an artist, and my dad worked in the timber trade. So that kind of corporate environment was very alien as a family to us. When I'm looking at jobs, as I said, I looked at lots of different companies, and when I was looking at Atos, it probably wasn't a priority of mine to look at an inclusive company as such. It was just, I need a job, I've finished university. And to be honest, I think if I'd looked, I don't think I would have found anything that would have necessarily been proactively inclusive to talk about diversity inclusion on the website or any other kind of collateral that I would have seen. Bear in mind, this is 10 years ago. So as I said, I was out and proud at university, and then coming into the corporate workplace, I then had that the sort of thought process of, well, what do I do now? I have a girlfriend, she's part of my life. I was out to my parents, and my parents said, do not come out in the workplace, don't tell anyone you're gay, it will impact your career. Yeah, you could get fired for it, which we know by law that is not possible, but yeah, there was a lot of fear. So yeah, I think and by this point I'd been offered the role, and I had a really good experience throughout the recruitment process. Although there was nothing kind of proactively out there around diversity inclusion, the people that I'd all met seemed really friendly. Yeah, and I felt like I'd made the right decision. So I joined the workplace thinking I need to keep the secret. Yeah, certainly the first few weeks when I was there, and you get to know some of your colleagues, and I was part of quite a large graduate cohort. I think there was about 50 or 60 of us, and you have a couple of weeks doing training together. But I'm actually not very good at keeping secrets. So I was a bit like this. I was kind of dancing around. No, I wasn't really, but yeah, I couldn't hide myself. I was terrible at lying. And I knew quite early on when my line manager asked, it was part of the conversation, she wasn't being nosy, but if I had a partner, and I thought it's interesting her choice of words there, and she has given me that ability to, you know, she hasn't said, have you got a boyfriend? And I've kind of gone, oh, well, no. So that made me feel much more comfortable. And so at that point, I was pretty out. I wouldn't say I was dancing down the corridor like that. But if people asked, I would tell them, and that was great. So I started working as a service delivery manager. So it was kind of like I was the point of contact for our clients when, you know, IT went wrong or we needed to make improvements. I was the kind of single point of contact for our customers, and you get given quite a bit of responsibility quite early on in the Atos graduate scheme. And, you know, we've all heard this phrase, the customer's always right. And I was starting to work in a much more client-facing role. I was working away from home, so I was travelling up to Aberdeen a couple of days a week. I said quite a lot of responsibility. And you're building relationships with your customer as well as your internal teams. And this was the sort of first time that I was kind of on my own with the client and sussing out those relationships. And I must say that I wasn't really picking up the best vibes from my client. And for those of you on the phone who are LGBT, you will know that coming out is an ongoing process. And as part of that, it is really making those kind of constant assessments. Do I feel safe? You know, why am I kind of coming out to you? Is there anything that I'll gain? Is there anything that I lose? And that constant sort of balancing act. Now, this particular client, I talked about not picking up the best vibes. Well, there was a couple of individuals who were particularly racist. Now, that's never a good thing, and I escalated that and flagged it to our senior managers, and thankfully it kind of got dealt with. But it didn't make me feel particularly safe or included. So when they started asking me about my home life, and again, not from being nosy, just because as you're building relationships, I went back into that closet. So for 2.5 years, I worked with this client. So out and proud in my home life with my direct management and team, but to the client who I was spending most of my time with and away from home, I was having to dance around those pronouns. And it wasn't really until the last day of that 2.5 years of working with them, we were in the pub, obviously, that I think it must have been, I don't know, unconscious slip really. So during that 2.5 years, I got engaged, and I had my engagement ring, but I would take it off every time that I would go up because, gosh, I certainly didn't want to encourage that conversation. But on this final day, it was really interesting. I'd obviously left it on by accident or not taken it off, and they were like, "Hang on a minute, Julia, all of a sudden you're engaged. We didn't even know you was seeing anyone." So I came out in that situation, and the client's reaction was that they were disappointed. They felt that I'd lied to them. And it was just like, hang on a minute, I've done this because I felt like I was protecting myself. I, you know, wasn't getting that kind of inclusiveness. And I thought, I was like, what have I done wrong? I don't understand. You know, and on reflection, I probably did judge some of them too quickly based on a couple of individuals, but, you know, I still think that was a bit of a reflection on the wider workplace. So that was the last day of working with that client, and kind of following that, I thought, you know what, I'm not going to hide myself. I know that Atos have got my back. I know that if, God forbid, anything had happened, I'd seen how they'd addressed the issue around racism. But actually, I was in the right. I could be myself. I didn't need to lie to protect the client. And also since then, I found out that Atos have, through a very large bid with the client, there was somebody on the client side who was portraying not particularly nice behaviours. I think they were sexist, and just kind of not really aligning to our values. And what was really fascinating to me was that Atos decided to walk away from that client because of that. And I think that stepping away from money is quite a powerful act. So yeah, like I say, I knew that I had confidence in my employer. So I was then promoted to a senior service delivery manager. I'm gaining more confidence, and not only in my ability at work, but my confidence in my identity. So when I was next asked by a client, I knew that do I have a partner? I knew that I could answer proudly. So yeah, so I'd been in the organisation then for about 3 or 4 years, and hopefully some of you have kind of heard this phrase before. It's, I think Stonewall tend to use it, and I really did believe that, and I think I saw it in myself, that people do perform better when they can be themselves and not having to waste time and energy on lying or avoiding the truth, like I said, kind of dancing around those pronouns. As I said, as I was gaining confidence, I was starting to look around a little bit more in the wider organisation as to what were Atos doing around diversity and inclusion. And by this point, we were doing quite a lot around women in IT and the various different initiatives and investments happening. But I wasn't seeing it relating to me. Obviously, as a LGBT person, I was looking kind of for that particular experience at the time. And I remember putting my hand up in, I can't remember, some D&I forum and saying, no, is there anything around LGBT plus people, kind of gender identity, sexual orientation? And it was kind of like, no, but if you want to do something, off you go. And it was kind of like this, it was quite a risk averse organisation, very global. I think there was a lot of, and there still is to an extent, nervousness around different countries and the legal elements of it and cultural differences. But I was very much given that support to say, do you know what, if that's something that you want to look at in the UK, then crack on. So that's exactly what we did. So myself and a colleague who was the first other gay person that I met at Atos, and what's been fantastic is that we've then seen that grow. So we started off by setting up the Pride Network. And I remember so clearly sat in our head office and we sent an email out to the entire UK organisation, to 10,000 people. And I was effectively outing myself to all of them, saying that we were setting this up. And I was sat there just sweating. It was awful. But the feedback, that as soon as the press said, the feedback we got from people was wonderful. And so many, not just LGBT plus people, but allies who had a bisexual sister or a cousin who was trans or non-binary, and it was just wonderful to get that feedback. And before we knew it, it was going a bit bananas, to be honest. We had over 1,000 people in 34 different countries who were then part of this network, considering it was meant to be just like quite a low-key thing. But it just showed that the need for it. Now, that whirlwind of activity came with working with senior stakeholders, working with external companies, and a massive shout out to Vodafone for all their support. They were just brilliant, and yeah, hats off to them. Fujitsu as well, and Stonewall as part of their workplace equality index sort of framework that they used, that we used to kind of provide a bit of a framework behind it. As I talked about, kind of working in tech, there's lots of focus around women in IT, and it felt a bit sort of, plodding on a little bit. It felt like we'd been talking about it for so long, and this was something so different. It was very colourful, and people sharing such personal things about them, and it had such an impact on our culture. And I talk quite a lot about doing the little big things. So for me, this is where you can do low resource, so low cost, not very much time actions, but they have a really big impact. So it's always music to the ears of our senior management when things don't cost money, but absolutely changes hearts and minds. And some of the things that we looked at doing, so we created a gender transition policy, we updated all of our diversity and inclusion policies. We have got introduction of the MX title worldwide. We've done reverse mentoring. We've done all sorts of webinars, raising awareness type pieces, and all of these little actions were things that people could contribute in their own way, didn't really take much investment, but they had this ripple effect. And like I say, changing hearts and minds was incredibly powerful. Sort of thinking about what we've achieved. So throughout the years, as you can see, that we have progressed through the Stonewall Workplace Quality Index. So in 2017, we were ranked down at 339. And then last year we got to number 40. And I know the amount of work that goes into these things. Like, this isn't just a, you know, we'll march in a pride parade one year and tick in the box and isn't that wonderful? It's absolutely not. It is really embedding these things into policies and processes and making sure that they're sustainable. So that's something that I'm incredibly proud of. So kind of linking this back into my career at this point. So I got another promotion, and I was looking after our service delivery management practice, which was a community of 200 service delivery managers. I'm really looking then more strategically, looking at our best practice, looking at the work that we do on our own separate client accounts, and how do we bring it together? How do we make sure that we're providing that training? And it got me thinking about the work that we were doing with the Pride Network, and making sure that we were being more intersectional. And this is really kind of like realizing that in our little diversity inclusion networks, with the Pride Network, we're probably being a little bit siloed. And so we needed to make sure that we were taking that step back and recognizing that people have overlapping identities, and we needed to make sure that the initiatives that we were putting in place represented it. Myself, as a gay cis white woman, I have a very different experience to other people, and so we needed to make sure that we really had that framework and address that privilege. So a number of different actions. So we have annual events now that we address different diversity inclusion issues together, really kind of bringing in experts in different areas. We've updated our job descriptions globally to make sure that our kind of statements on inclusion are much more powerful and stronger and really embedded into the way that we work. And we've done things like a Strive for Pride event where we look at LGBT plus mental health, or we've done things like with our race network and making sure that we're addressing racism in the LGBT plus community. So really kind of taking that step back, and that really correlated with my role of being a little bit more senior, taking that step back, being more strategic, and actually looking at where we can learn from each other. I'll keep going because I'm conscious of time. Then thinking about my role that I'm in now. So I am now the head of customer experience, communications and strategy. And it's probably a bit of a random jump. So within the last role and that kind of community building, and with all the work that I was learning and getting involved in from a Pride Network, I was doing a lot around communications and engagement, and customer experience, and that was really important to me. And I think it links really well with employee experience, and how do we make sure that we are designing services that are inclusive. And we talk about human-centric design, to make sure things are accessible, but also how can our people deliver the best experience for our customers if they're not getting their best experience as employees. So it's a fascinating job. I love it. And as part of this role, I was now responsible for 26 people. Well, I am now responsible for 26 people, which is going from not having any line management experience to that. And I felt this real responsibility. But throughout the work that I've been involved in from diversity inclusion, I'd learned so much about people and the things that motivate them, the things that worry them. And for me, that's what inclusive leadership is all about. It's about really getting to know the people that you have in your teams. And don't get me wrong, I think you can be a leader without being a line manager. Our graduates at Atos are absolutely our future leaders, and they are looked upon, with great esteem. They are our talent coming through. Inclusive leadership to me is also around vulnerability. And I think we've seen a lot of that through this last year with COVID, and the fact that you can't have a separate work and life so much when life is happening around you and you're within your background, people's children and caring responsibilities. From my own personal experience, my mum passed away this time last year, and so I had the experience of grief through the workplace, and I had to be quite vulnerable about that because I was vulnerable, and I wanted to make sure that I had access to the right support mechanisms. So we have, thankfully, free counselling at work, and so I took advantage of that. And I had to tell my colleagues about it because of how it impacted me in the way that I was working. So inclusive leadership and that kind of vulnerability and being able to sort of say, I'm human too, I'm struggling, I think is really key. And like I say, you don't have to be a line manager to be inclusive. I don't believe. So those are the kind of, and I've done a whistle stop tour throughout of all of these things, but kind of hopefully sort of showed how some of the things that I've learned along the way. I do think my involvement in the diversity inclusion world has absolutely helped me get to where I am. And I probably forgot to mention that my boss now is the exec sponsor for our Atos Pride Network, who I met a few years ago, and it was only from him seeing the work that I was doing within the Pride Network that he got to know me, and I got to know that actually he was the sort of person I'd like to work for, and that he could see the sort of skills that I had. So to kind of summarize up really, understanding the issues. For me, this is also kind of recognizing intersectionality. So you might have your own personal experiences, but also recognizing that the people around you, your own kind of circle of influence, that they'll have different things going on. And we can go out and learn those things either through talking to others, attending webinars, attending things like this, which is fantastic, taking time out of your day, reading stuff on social media. Stop being an authentic leader. It's about being an inclusive leader, being true to yourself where you can, of course, if it's safe to do so. I also wanted to call out the do the little big things, because I think sometimes it can feel hard when you're a new starter or a graduate, like, what influence do I have? I don't have a budget. But actually those small, low cost, low impact activities that can really change culture is incredibly powerful. And I think as graduates, when you move into the workforce, take advantage of that, the position that you're in. And I finish on a slightly cheesy note, but have kind eyes. So this is something that I heard Ruth Hunt, the CEO of Stonewall, previous CEO of Stonewall, say once, and it was pre-COVID, and it was talking around the fact that we're all human at the end of the day. I'm sat behind a computer screen here talking to you today. We've all got things going on behind us, and sometimes people say the wrong things, we make mistakes, but we've got to kind of look to each other in kind eyes. And I mentioned COVID because it makes me chuckle a little bit when we're wearing our masks and that's all you can see. And, we have to just recognise that it is a really difficult time and place for everyone. And we've got those kind of complex lives that we're living. So I'll finish just sort of saying, I really hope 10 years on from applying as a grad that I know that we are in a totally different place at my workplace. And I know that if you went onto our website now, hope you have a very different experience than I had, and hopefully some of the work that I've been involved in has helped that. So I'm going to stop there because I think I might have some questions coming through. But yeah, thank you very much for listening.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that. And yeah, we've got a couple of questions that have come through for you.
Super.
So to kick off,
yeah, go on.
I'm just going to read. Do you have any advice for allies attending today, how they can make it clear they're offering a safe space for LGBT colleagues?
I love this question. Yes. So I think it's about being proactively inclusive. And we talk a lot about this at work, that when you go into a new space, you're meeting new people, you're never going to expect someone to be sat there like, I'm going to discriminate against someone today. That you'd hope that they would be that inclusive ally, but unless they're being proactive with sharing that, how do you know? So I think it's kind of really challenging yourself to say, actually, when I'm meeting new people, either having that conversation as part of meetings, is it having in your email signatures, I am an ally? There's some really small cues that you can do that make a big impact.
Thank you. And kind of following on from this, a bit about supporting, what are kind of the most important steps in creating these new EDI LGBT networks within companies that don't have one yet?
So the allies, definitely, because as well, some people might not feel comfortable necessarily sharing their personal stories, and getting that sort of senior stakeholder support. So we leaned on external companies quite a bit. So our competitors, even, who were so gracious and kind of sharing information to say, could you get your senior person to talk to my senior person, because we think that they'd listen better. And so definitely linking in different organizations, and I'd be happy to chat to people separately to this if they need any help. But yeah, I think senior support and allies would be top ones. And also, I think it's going beyond. I think the business benefits are pretty obvious now. There's so much research, it's just the right thing to do.
Excellent. And this is one that I'm not sure you might be able to answer, but maybe is there anything that you know of that can to encourage employers to pay people for their EDI work? Since I know a lot of it becomes free labour.
Yeah, and I saw that question on a previous session, and it is something that we talk about quite a bit. I mean, I think for me personally, I've always been given the time to do it within my day job. So it's not like I'm doing unpaid labour because it's not eating into my extra time. So I'm very fortunate from that perspective. And I think it's absolutely making, so we always put it into our objectives. So it's a business objective. It makes business sense that you're recognized for that. I think it's obviously hard, certainly for smaller organizations, to do that. I mean, I absolutely kind of push to get the most out of like extra training. Again, kind of the promotions that I've got, I think is because I've gained that experience. So I think there's a bit of a balance of, yeah, of course, if you're doing things that are taking you out of your working day and impacting that, then having those conversations with your employer to say, well, hang on a minute, you're telling me that D&I is really important to you as a business, but how am I getting recognised for it? And it's obviously going to balancing it.
Thank you. That's some good advice there, I think. So this one is, if ATOS is a global client, surely there are times they don't work away. How do you think companies and universities can keep best true to their values and deal with the global market? So I guess this is about if you're dealing with people who globally who don't maybe have the same views on LGBT rights as we do.
Yeah, definitely. And it's it's something I do struggle with, because yeah, absolutely, we have presence in companies that don't align with our values, so don't have the perfect answer. I think again, allies are really key to be able to have those conversations safely. I absolutely never want to put an LGBT person at risk to kind of be pushing back. I think as a global organization, though, we do have global leadership, so and that can bring challenges, because I'm coming here from a very privileged place in the UK to say, well, why aren't you doing this in that country, without kind of being on the ground? So we do work really closely with those people to kind of get that balance of legal and kind of cultural differences. I don't know the answer. I know Vodafone and Fujitsu and another couple of others that have different models. There's like an embassy model, and it's really interesting. I'll see if I can get a link to share if people are interested in more detail, but Vodafone have done a lot of research into this. And yeah, I'd love to know the answer.
Hey, that sounds good. Yeah, if you could drop any links you maybe have and maybe your contact details in the chat, that would probably be really helpful to get people questions, because there is another question, but I'm not sure we're going to have time for it now. But thank you very much for speaking to us. It was really informative, and you gave us a lot of great tips to help both LGBT people and our allies. So
thank you so much, everyone, and I'll reply on the chat. Cheers.